Welcome to the iSpring Solutions webinar series, where every week we talk about e-learning trends, share iSpring tips and tricks, and cover clients' cases. Happy to have all of you here today with us. All right, let's officially begin our presentation. So I am Paulina Ionina, the community manager at iSpring, and I will be the moderator for today's webinar. And we are going to talk about the real e-learning trends for 2021. And to cover this topic, I have invited Shalini Merugu from CommLab India. Hi, Shalini. How are you doing? Thanks a lot for tuning in.
Hi, Paulina. Thank you for inviting me to do this. I'm very
Perfect.
excited about today's session and a very warm welcome to everyone.
And at this point, Shalini, I am more than happy to pass the mic over to you as well as the presenter rights, of course.
Thank you. Thank you, Paulina. So let me just get right into the webinar with a very quick introduction to what we do as a company. So we offer the following services: classroom training to ILT and VILT conversions. And we also convert legacy courses and Flash-based courses to HTML5. We offer full-fledged e-learning translation services and LMS services. And CommLab India has won some of these awards, which you can see on the screen. And a very quick introduction to myself. I'm part of the learning design team, and I have been in this field for over 15 plus years. And my specialty is customer training, learning solutions, and user assistance solutions. And I contribute to customer education workshops such as this, and I have an MA in English literature. Based on our own experience with our customers and the kind of work that has come our way increasingly in the recent months, and what is in the pipeline for this year, as well as our surveys with our customers and industry reports, these are the top 5 trends that we identified. And I'll very quickly take you through each of these. So the first one is to do with the L&D unit, the L&D department playing a more strategic role than it ever used to before. The second trend is that of virtual training, which all of you, I think most of you rightly pointed out. And what is it? What goes into it? What are the challenges? And why is this something that we need to focus on? And then I'm going to talk about one area of focus, which most L&D professionals who were polled in a LinkedIn workplace report, in a poll, said that the biggest challenge for them was something for which the 4 R's are the solution. And then I'm going to talk about blended learning, which is another top trend, and learning experience platforms, which are, this market is just exploding. I think creating a learning culture has clearly been identified as the top uh, success factor for training to really deliver results. And to be able to do that, the entire focus is on the learner experience. So how do we do that? I think there's a subtle shift in the role of L&D. And this section, which I'm going to cover, has actually been shared by one of our customers at our annual CommLab learning event called LearnFlux. So let me talk about what we are as a department, as a unit. How are we positioned? Because in order to create a learning culture, it is very imperative that we position ourselves correctly. So do take a minute to pause and think about how is your L&D unit positioned? Is it in the traditional role of an order taker where we take requests from business leaders and we roll out training programs? Or is there a strategic shift? And are we now moving, or have we moved to the role of an impact maker, where we are not just providing solutions, but we actually have a seat at the executive table, and we have a say in the decision making, and we are working very actively with the C-suite to look at what are the challenges our organizations are facing, which training can successfully resolve. So, I think most of us would agree that probably we are somewhere in between, and some of us are probably right, at the to the right of this picture. So we are not entirely order takers, although probably that was traditionally how we started. But I think more than anything else, the events over the last couple of months have put the L&D unit in the spotlight, because suddenly there was this compelling, urgent need for L&D to play a more active role, because of the sheer disruption that was caused to businesses, to organizations, to training, to skill initiatives. And L&D had to very quickly make that switch from taking orders to suggesting and recommending solutions, working very collaboratively with the executive suite and coming up with solutions which would actually create impact. And this is something that is gaining more and more importance across more and more organizations, where L&D is now a partner with the business leaders. So how do we do that? How do we transition our our L&D unit to become impact makers? I think one of the biggest areas of focus for most executives, especially this year, is measuring the impact of learning. And I think we can start these conversations by letting it be known that we can be held accountable for measurable results. I think these are some conversations which are not necessarily easy to have, but which are very essential to have. Once we begin to talk about measurable outcomes as the impact of our training, I think that is when we will really begin to be heard better. The next thing is to question. I think in the traditional role of order taker, we would execute whatever came our way. But I think this is a golden opportunity for us to step back and question and discover what truly is the need, and even go so far as to recommend that training may not really be the solution for that particular requirement that has been passed on by the business leaders, and do all that we can to see how we can demonstrate success of the training programs that we do roll out with a clearly identified need. The other is, as I mentioned earlier, in order to be taken seriously, to be heard, to have a voice at the table, we need to speak the language of the business. So we create interest by talking about tangible results, and by speaking the language of the business in terms of being totally aware of the big picture, the business goals, and what organizational performance are required, what inputs are required to up the curve for organizational performance, and drilling down at the individual level. And the focus today really has to be on, as I mentioned, impact. So that translates into observable changes which we can measure. So although we have been doing it in the past, it is something which, because there is no industry standard as such, I think each of us have been grappling in our own way with trying to demonstrate this. But it's time to really focus very keenly on this part of our role in order for us to be seen as impact makers. And then, of course, we persist uh, in our endeavor, and we also have a vision, a clearly articulated vision and mission for the L&D unit we are part of, and we market our unit within our organizations. Now, coming to the next trend, which I think in today's poll, 44%, if I'm not mistaken, pointed out that this could be the next big trend. So let's just take a look at what it is all about. So in a LinkedIn workplace learning report, L&D professionals were polled globally on where they expect budgets, where their budgets were likely to be spent. And 38% said that they were likely to spend less on instructor-led training, whereas 57% of L&D pros said that they expected to spend more on online learning. However, I think all of us intuitively know, and based on our own experience over the past couple of months, that VILTs, even though the spend is not going to be as high as that for online training, e-learning, it is here to stay. Because especially with many organizations offering their workforce permanent remote working options, there is just no other way to accommodate those kind of trainings which are best dealt with in a classroom. So VILTs are clearly here to stay, even though budgets may be higher for e-learning. So what exactly are VILTs and what are they not? I think initially many felt that a virtual training was nothing more than a webinar where you share knowledge, you dispense training, and you take the existing ILT materials and you conduct it using a software platform, a conferencing facility. But there are some critical differences, which I think even for those of us who are new to VILT discovered very quickly down the road. So basically, VILT or virtual instructor-led training, for those who are very new to this, is synchronous training. It is a synchronous event training, which is held through a video conferencing software, and it lets learners interact and collaborate with each other and with the instructor. Now, if you remember in webinars, typically the interaction, although it is there, it is typically between the facilitator and the participants. Now, in a full-fledged VILT, there is many-to-many interaction. So learners collaborate among themselves and with the instructor as well. Now, there are a couple of challenges which I think we learned how to overcome and which could still be pretty daunting to those of us who are still relatively new to this medium, especially the unfamiliar format, the technology. It could be intimidating. Although now with remote work, everybody is very comfortable with remote meetings and so on. Uh, because of the many features in the software and the technology, it could still be slightly intimidating. So we need to keep this at the back of our mind when we are getting ready to roll out VILTs. The other challenge is adding engagements. It needs more effort. Spontaneous activities they may not just work, although they work very well in an actual physical classroom. And initially, the engagement can seem slightly forced. Managing activities, facilitating, all of this could also be a challenge uh, if it is not thought through very carefully, because activities can become a logistical nightmare for the simple reason that there is a third entity in the mix, that of the technology platform itself and the need for somebody to manage it. And then the content piece of it. You can't just take existing ILT materials and use them as is in a VILT, as many of us have discovered. So there has to be some kind of tweaking, and typically with materials being written by trainers, there is every possibility of oversights initially. So there are these challenges which are there, but which can be very successfully overcome. And the good news is there are so many platforms with so many features that are common across most of them. So it's really a question of what your organization chooses and practicing with it, having mocks, dry runs, and so on. So these are some of the common platforms, and these are some of the common features that are available across these platforms, which make VILTs highly engaging and a very able substitute for classroom training. Now, the next trend that I would like to touch on is what we at CommLab call the 4 Rs of rapid e-learning design, or the 4 Rs of rapid e-learning conversion. Now, there is this report, the same LinkedIn Workplace Learning report, which I mentioned, in which L&D pros were asked what would their main area of focus be in 2020. So 51% of them responded that they planned launching upskilling programs, and a huge 43% said that they were planning on launching reskilling programs. And I think based on the latest LinkedIn Workplace Learning Report 2021, the statistics are even more interesting. It's 59% of L&D pros who felt that their top priority and their top area of focus this year would be upskilling and reskilling programs. And for the simple reason that the pace of business and the technology changes has put this need right at the top and right at the center of all that we do. And the top need of the hour is, how do you do this? How do you do this at scale? How do you reskill and upskill your workforce, your employees, bringing in scale? And in fact, this was one of the challenge. This was one of the challenges that L&D pros pointed out. Scaling learning across the organization. 26% of them felt that this was a huge challenge. So let's see how our 4 Rs can help in addressing this challenge and why they are a trend. So these are the 4 Rs: recording, republishing, rebuilding, and redesigning. I'll very quickly take you through each of these. Now, when we are faced with very urgent training requests and there is no time to do a fully fledged end-to-end customized e-learning course using the sophisticated authoring tools, we found that the quickest way to roll out training is to record the subject matter expert. So using this method, we found that we could be very effective at a fraction of the cost and at a fraction of the using a fraction of the effort it required. So just a reminder that SMEs or subject matter experts, their primary job isn't training, and most of them are totally hard pressed for time. And especially now when the need for training is so urgent and compelling, they're inundated with so many requests. So this is one way in which we can save the SME's time. So what we did was we asked the SME to come up with a quick and dirty PowerPoint and use the PowerPoint audio to record themselves as they walk through the slides. Or they could just record it on their phone. And they would give us this PowerPoint to us, and we would transcribe it and design the PowerPoint slides. And we would send this back to the SME. So with a clear transcript, stripped of all unnecessary uh, content, redundancies, repetitions. The SME had a very tight script which they could review and the design slides to go with it. And in case there was any feedback, we would fix it. And then we would record the audio using professional voiceover and the outcome and get it signed off. So the outcome was a very quick, rapid e-learning solution in the form of videos, which captured the essence of the SME's training. And these were courses with personality because it captured the real voice, the real essence of the SME. So recording to save the SME time is one of the R's that we have used successfully. The second one is republishing. I think all of us are sitting on a lot of courses which were developed using older versions of authoring tools, and some of them may not have been necessarily built for mobile compatibility. So this is a golden opportunity for us to, since we are looking at reskilling and upskilling, this is a good chance for us to take a good look at our older courses and republish them to make sure that the reach is more, the engagement is more. So we could update the interactivities, give content a fresh look and feel, so that it reflects even the latest branding, and of course to make them translation friendly. So this is one thing that I think uh, is increasingly being focused on by many training departments in most organizations. The third R is rebuilding our courses in the form of micro learning assets. Now, since we are taking a really hard look at training and our existing training solutions, this is the ideal time when we can look at what can be repurposed, what can be broken down, so that there is more learner engagement. I mean, how do you make sure that, learners don't get daunted by the sheer length of your course? So, taking a long, lengthy course and breaking it down into micro learning assets is a very effective way to make sure that learning happens. So, micro learning can be used as before the training, in the form of a quiz to gauge their existing knowledge or to get their attention. It can be used as the actual training content itself, as standalone modules or assets, even within a VILT. Or what you see there are some of the various possibilities for microlearning assets: quizzes, flashcards, ebooks, infographics, and videos, of course, need no introduction. And the interesting thing about microlearning assets is that we can also use them post training, just to make sure that people don't get lost in the forgetting curve. So, microlearning assets can be used as periodic refresher training and to offer performance support. The main thing is to make sure that the microlearning modules, each of them covers just one learning objective. Of course, there are courses which necessarily have to be long because there is content that does not necessarily lend itself to being broken down into micro learning nuggets, which is fine, which is really fine. So, again, these decisions are on a highly individualized basis, on a case by case basis. And but for the most part, we have found that many courses can be very successfully redeployed in the form of micro learning assets. And the beauty is that, some of the assets that you create for your actual training, the same content can be very quickly repurposed into another micro learning format. So if you have, for instance, if you have quizzes, then you can just, based on that, you can repurpose it into uh, refresher material for concept and process maps, for instance. Or if you have some interesting conceptual information in your teaching content of your microlearning module, you can repurpose that as a job aid after the training in the form of an infographic that can be mailed to all your participants, possibly a month after the training is over. The fourth R is redesigning to get started with blended learning. I think in today's poll, uh, blended learning was also clearly identified as one of the top trends, and I think globally it has been the it has been that way. So with this redesign strategy, you can convert your classroom training and materials to online training. So that could be either e-learning or micro learning or mobile learning, or you can also convert part of it to virtual instructor-led training. So it was found that, the more the number of formats were available for learners, the higher the likelihood of their being engaged. So blended learning actually lends itself very well. I'll touch upon it in a little more detail later. So what exactly would a blended learning solution look like? So it would mean a combination of VILT plus e-learning plus performance support. So the entire mix together would constitute a good, robust blended learning solution. So here's a very quick look at the process of converting classroom materials to e-learning. Because as the trend also identified, I think more training budgets are likely to go into the e-learning part this year. So a very quick look, analyzing the learners, studying the learning environment. Where are they going to take the course from? Are they going to be on the go? Are they salespeople who grab these learning nuggets on the move, or are they not mobile? So the kind of decisions we would take would be determined by the learning environment. Excuse me. And then this is a perfect opportunity to revisit the learning objectives and really consider if there's something that might lend itself, better as a job aid or into some other format. So if something can be better addressed through e-learning, this is a time, and at the same time revisit the learning objectives as well. And of course, the content analysis piece, identifying and filling content gaps. And also, this is a golden chance for us to shelve outdated content, because I think sometimes there are mountain loads of content that are available, and some of it need not necessarily have a long shelf life, but there's been no time or focus in addressing those. So now that we are in the process of converting a lot of our classroom materials to e-learning, this is the golden opportunity we were waiting for. So identifying, filling content gaps, coming up with an appropriate strategy. Uh, by strategy, I mean, would you like to do it through scenario based learning, or would you want a guided learning approach where there's a mentor or a coach taking you through the learning, and so on? And then we decide, take decisions around the audio. How much of audio is good? Do you want the course to be audio intensive, or would it be just moderate audio follow with along with moderate on-screen text? And then we decide on the level of interactivity. Since your course is going to function as the instructor, I think really it's target audience and the nature of content and this and the criticality of that training, which would determine the kind of level of interactivity you would go in for. And then we would incorporate our practice questions and provide some way of assessing the learner's progress towards the end in the form of an exam. So, this is a very quick process of converting ILT materials to e learning, and which again would be part of this bigger blended learning solution. So, let me go into blended learning in a little more detail. Okay, before that, I'd like to just take you through this interesting graph shared by the training industry on the emphasis. What delivery modalities were companies emphasizing on? So while ILT was still was it's 60%. So if you look at the legends down, 60% is about the same, and the percentage of companies which were planning to invest more this year is 21%. So the most popular modalities are ILT, VILT, e-learning, and video-based learning, and of course now increasingly social and informal learning. What is interesting is, the e-learning component. 44% of companies felt that they would be investing more in e-learning uh, as compared to those who felt that they would invest just about the same. So these are some interesting figures which you can take a closer look at once this uh, recording is made available. Intuitively, I think we know that learning is actually a process. It's a continual, ongoing process. And I've tried to just depict it visually, just to show the various milestones or the various points in this process, which really all together contribute to the learning experience. Starts with awareness, being prepared for the learning, getting hold of the learner's attention, giving them a chance to recall their previous knowledge, and then presenting them with the new knowledge or the new skills or whatever it is you're trying to train them on, demonstrating it to the extent possible, giving them opportunities to try it out, and giving feedback, throwing reflective questions which enable them to think through and process the new learning, and assessing them, rewarding the learners, and providing ongoing coaching opportunities, and also giving them opportunities to reinforce their learning through refresher training and so on. So I think this is a very simplistic depiction of the learning process. Now, you might be wondering, what's this got to do with blended learning? So, blended learning is a modality which actually lends itself well to support learning at various points in this learning process. So, if learning is a journey, there are different parts of the blend that can be used very effectively at different points to make sure that by the end of it, the learner has had a rich learning experience. Now, what exactly is it? We use blended learning to use a variety of formats. So some of these, as you can see, they're live, they're synchronous, virtual collaboration, or they're asynchronous virtual collaboration through bulletin boards, emails, and so on. Self-paced learning, of course, is one of the most popular options because it really leaves uh, a lot of control in the hands of the learner. And then you have your social learning and your performance support. So what we do in a blended learning solution is we maximize the use of each of these delivery formats. So let me show you through an example. With blended learning, we can offer continuous learning. So this is something we put together for one of our customers, where we first started with a quiz on basic concepts on the product. And depending on their performance on the quiz, participants were either sent for hands-on training or they were sent to the e-learning part of it. Now, once they got trained in whichever format was recommended given their scores, it was followed by a challenge, and which was again the learning continued to videos and animations, followed by coaching. And then a lot of performance support was given to the participants through various formats, which were all accessible through a mobile app built for this purpose. So this is a small example of a blended learning solution. And while different formats can of course be used in any sequence, but I think the flipped classroom is what is increasingly popular. So by flipped classroom, I mean the self-study component being in the form of online training or online assessments, and then going on to the actual virtual classroom training or the actual classroom training, again followed by online training and with performance support. So this is something that's increasingly popular. Now I come to the last trend, which is that of the learning experience platform, or the LXP. I think in one of the challenges we identified, the one of the top options voted was creating a learning culture. Now it's very difficult to create a learning culture without the right technological support to facilitate it. And this is where LXPs are playing a revolutionary role. So let's see what some statistics from the marketplace have to speak about. Now, 49% of L&D professionals polled said that getting managers to make learning a priority for the teams was a challenge. Increasing employee engagement is again a huge number, 36%. And helping learners find the resources and teaching employees how to use technology more effectively is 31%. So how are all these challenges addressed by using a learning experience platform? Let's take a quick look. So what exactly is an LXP? So basically, it is a software which gives you a unified interface. So it is like an entire learning ecosystem in the sense that it curates learning resources across multiple platforms. So when you have resources, learning, training resources, collateral sitting in various other uh, systems, the LXP is one place which provides access to all of these. So resources can be integrated across multiple platforms, and based on the kind of your history of learning, it makes learning very personalized by offering recommendations based on your preferences, your behavior, your performance, much like the Netflix experience, where based on what we've watched, it throws up recommendations, and you might like this too. So that is something that makes it very personalized and increases the likelihood of learner engagement. So an LXP does all that. And a very quick look at the differences between an LXP and an LMS. So the LMS is basically a platform to host training material, and the focus was more on making it administrator driven. So the focus was on training management, whereas an LXP is entirely a learner driven experience. And the focus is on creating a friendly, useful, effective learning experience. And it gives you an intuitive, open platform that is very easy to use. And what is more, it also allows learners to upload their own content. User generated content can be uploaded on the fly, so which makes it hugely popular. And increasingly, this market is booming. So, once again, a very quick look at the key capabilities of an LXP content curation, because it uses AI, artificial intelligence, to offer the right content to the right learners and in the right format and at the right time. And another aspect of the LXP is that it helps in sharing knowledge and experiences. So you can actually set up channels. Learners can set up their own playlists of recommended trainings or resources that they found useful. There are discussion walls for activities and so on, because social and collaborative learning is also increasingly gaining leverage. And finally, for data analytics, an LXP offers great tools where you can track all of these things. If you remember, one of the points about L&D being an impact maker was that we need to be able to demonstrate the impact of learning. And this is where the data analytics feature of LXPs plays a very key role in offering insights into all of these mentioned here. And now I'd like to just throw open the session for questions. Please do go ahead.
Very exciting. I also would like to share one more link. Since you were mentioning micro learning as one of the trends, I would like to share the link to the webinar that we once held, and it refers to the myths about microlearning. I highly recommend, if you're interested to learn more about the topic, check out this webinar. It's been presented by the expert in this field, so you're more than welcome to go ahead and check it out. And yes, at this point, I think we are more than ready for the questions. And Shalini, I would like to go ahead and address the first one to you. What is the main,
Sure.
yeah, what is the main difference between VILT and a webinar?
Okay. So a webinar is typically used for knowledge sharing, and the interaction is usually one to many. So you have a person who's sharing, and the communication is mostly one way, except for a quick poll here and there. It is more for the purpose of thought leadership, sharing something. There are no clearly defined learning outcomes in a webinar. Neither is there material which progresses in an effort to meet some particular outcome. Whereas in a VILT, as with any other training initiative, there has to be a very clearly defined training goal. So there are clearly articulated learning outcomes in the form of specific learning objectives. And as with a typical physical classroom training, the interaction is both ways, and there is ample opportunity given for participants to interact with each other and with the facilitator. And there are activities for which participants collaborate with each other too. Whereas in a webinar, participants do not interact with each other. The other major difference is that VILTs have well structured, well defined, instructionally sound materials that accompany it. So you have your facilitator guides, you have your participant guides, which are your core content. In a webinar, typically what you have is just a recording of the webinar topic that was shared. So, and another main feature of VILT is that you have assessments in some form or the other. Maybe you have your VILT session followed by an online quiz to measure your learning. Now, in webinars, since there is no there is no outcome, clearly defined learning outcome, There's no question of assessing or having an exam or a quiz. Um, so when there is a clear performance need, you would want to go with a virtual training, not a webinar. Does that answer your question?
I hope that does answer the question. Now I am ready to address another question to you,
Mhm.
Shalini. So, to what extent is blended learning being used for degree type education?
Right, and that's interesting because I think with by degree kind of education, you're referring to academics, I presume.
Yes, yes,
Okay,
the answer
so
is yes.
blended learning actually is being used not just by organizations but also by typically it used to be the stronghold of corporates, but now given our current situation and the likelihood of things not exactly going back to normal the way we once knew normal, it is becoming increasingly popular across cutting across all kinds of industries, not just the corporate world but the NGO, the not for profit organizations are using it, and of course academic institutions have begun to use it in a very big way.
So, a question from Daniel. Is an LXP platform like an interface mainly used at elementary schools that includes a plethora of resources for users to access, like BrainPop, iReady, Mayan, and other learning tools? Do you have an answer to that?
And LXP, I'm not really aware of its use in elementary schools, but it is a huge thing as far as uh, organizations go. Because earlier, organizations that were using only an LMS or a learning management system to host their training found that having an LXP on top of their LMS was really the best way to optimize learning resources which were located in various other platforms and systems within the organization. So it could even be an ERP, it could be just about any software system which had any kind of useful training resources. So an LXP would sit on top of your LMS and curate content from multiple places. So in the context of organizations, this is what it would function as. But I could always probably check and get back, maybe along with the recording, probably give an answer about the elementary schools part of it, because honestly I'm not too familiar with that use.
And maybe we could super briefly cover the question from Christina if you could address difference between VILT and e-learning.
Okay, so Christina, a virtual instructor led classroom is basically a digital replica of your actual physical classroom session. So it is a synchronous modality in the sense that all your participants are there at the same time, and training is happening is happening synchronously. So you have a group of learners who are participating in real time, and it's a live session. Whereas e-learning is an asynchronous medium. So it's mainly for self-study, where you can take online courses at your own convenience whenever you feel like. And that course is available for you 24 by 7. So that is one of the advantages actually of e-learning, that it's learning at your doorstep at your most convenient time. And while both have their pros and cons, it really depends on what it is you're trying to achieve, which will determine which format you would select. Because there are some topics which really don't lend themselves well to VILT and vice versa. So you, for instance, you wouldn't want to waste precious face-to-face time on something that can be learned by the learner individually through e-learning. And similarly, you wouldn't want to send cover some important training which requires, for example, team building, which requires interaction and practice sessions. Now you wouldn't want to condense that into an e-learning format when a VILT would be far more powerful. So really it depends, both have their pros and cons, and what you select depends on your specific training requirement. And as I mentioned earlier, with blended learning, uh, lot of organizations are revisiting their current training and seeing what is best ideally suited, which part of that solution is ideally suited for the classroom, which part of it is ideally suited for e-learning, and which part of it can be totally removed from the training aspect of it and shared in the form of performance support resources. I hope I've answered that question.
Yeah, so Christina's comment is I was thinking VILT was asynchronous, not a group experience.
Oh, all right, all right.
Mm-hmm.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
yeah. So it's time for us to wrap up the session. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah, I would like to thank everybody for coming to today's session, for sending your questions. That was a wonderful 1 hour spent with everybody, and I hope you guys have a wonderful day. And we will see you at the next webinar. Bye, everybody, and
Thank
bye,
you.
Shalini.
Thank you, Paulina. Thank you, everyone. Have a great day.